panel know the propositions, and this is a topic that touches upon economy. We are moving on with economic topics. We need to have all the actors, all players on the stage, the government. We have chambers representatives and the academia representatives. And certainly we'll get started with the government, since the government is organizing the meeting. Mr. Bitici, Deputy Prime Minister of the government, according to you, what were the key economic changes and challenges faced by this government and undertaken by this government in the past year? Thank you. The first challenge, as always, is which language to use. But I deem that one of the things that we've learned in the past 3 years was that time is very expensive, and I suppose that in order to understand each other better, we will have to use what is the quickest, is easiest for communication. One of the speakers said, I'll speak in Albanian, and it sounded to me I'll be speaking in English, and I said, oh, probably in 10 years' time we will all be doing that in English, but I'll keep speaking in Macedonian and quickly. The question is quite general, and the first challenge is whether to speak about figures or about the structural changes we're trying to implement. Just 10 years ago, in a similar conference, we discussed a similar topic. Today, 1 year after the government led by Dimitar Kovacevski, is that one of the key challenges that in the past 2 years, almost entering the year 3 of the government established back in 2020, once I got the position of Deputy Prime Minister of Economic Issues, one of the key challenges has been how and can we, in a period of economic crisis, discuss changes, development, even growth. And one of the key challenges here is the restructuring of our economy. I deem that everybody sitting here and on that side have been hearing this for a long time, that it's necessary for our economy, but let us see what has been done. If you remember well, back in 2017, the plan for economic growth was approved. That was the first strength that we as government set with the medium-term development component that will have to affect the change and restructuring of our economy. For the first time ever, back then, we started, instead of supporting investment and only foreign investment, we started supporting all types of investments, be it domestic or foreign ones. And I can proudly say nowadays that indeed we have a lot to show as an outcome of the changed policy, which proves that the government is not focused only on one of the parameters in the economy, which is the BDP growth as an macroeconomic category, but it is also key to see whether companies are supported, the business is supported, and whether the business is willing to respond to the challenges to bring about the well-desired growth and development. And I deem that the support in the production sector performed in the past 5 years has completely changed the entire infrastructure. The second point we had that is gradually bearing fruit, that as opposed to the support for companies and the economy in general, the segment of supporting research and development is going on the rise. And I won't discuss various instruments here because I deem that the other speakers will mention them. And the third point we had about the change policies and restructuring of economy is the segment of through the economic measures and policies to influence the equitable and equal economic development, as opposed to economic measures that deepen the gap between regions to suppress or eliminate or adequately reduce the gap between the regions within the country. And probably here figures will speak for themselves that year in, year out, investments are going up in the least developed region, because it's a toilsome process after a full distortion and increase in the gap between the Skopje region and all the other regions in the country. And the last point that I think is the introduction into the restructuring of our economy is the principle of support, that is to say, withdrawal of foreign investments, of attraction of foreign investment, sorry. And fortunately, I heard the other day that they didn't know how to attract foreign investments. I'll provide a simple answer here, that yes, we do very well how to attract foreign investments, because figures speaks for themselves, because last year, by the end of it, we had 560 million euro foreign investments according to the central bank. And what I'm glad to say, that zero funds of our citizens is used to promote that. There is a nice saying in English: the best way to promote and encourage companies to invest is the good word of mouth. And this is what we're doing. Companies and people can say a lot about our country. The second aspect of the full restructuring of the economy is the systemic aspects of strategy creation. Currently, we are defining, and we're coming to an end of defining the smart specialization, which will give the directions of movement of our economy in all the sectors that are key to create added value in the country. And this is the midterm planning, I may say. In terms of the long-term planning, I deem that the Professor Takefiti will speak much more. 2.5 years ago, we started the process of development of the national development strategy that gets involved all stakeholders, that because we back then thought that that was the right point to create the clear vision for our society in the coming 20 years. Smart specialization is a special part of our strategy, and it's just one segment, and the national development strategy covers all the segments of our living. In terms of whether right now or in this period we've created mechanisms and instruments to enable that and support that, Mr. Naumov from the Development Bank of North Macedonia will speak about how we'll manage to make the Development Bank the best possible tool in the financial system that introduce new mechanisms and instruments that should support the development in our country. Not only capitalization of the Development Bank, but they created successfully mechanisms together with the government where they piloted and were trailblazers in the financial market of our country. In fact, without the Development Bank, we couldn't have done that. In any developed countries, the Development Bank plays that particularly that role, and in a period of crisis, we did that, and I deem that we now have a partner that we lacked 5 years ago. And point number 4, that should be shared by me systemically, is what we are doing in terms of valuing labor Today we discussed, and the Prime Minister said what we've done about the minimum wages and average salary, and what I need to underscore in terms of the systemic change is the access to evaluating labor. For the first time ever in the country, neither the minimum wages or pensions are used as a tool for blackmailing, but there is a system that has been established through a mechanism that harmonizes minimum wages and pensions every year with the criteria that are previously known, because that will bring about sustainable growth both of the minimum wage and dignified payment for labor in our labor market. And last point that I deem you would expect in my initial speech to speak about figures, money, anti-crisis measures. But I'm convinced that everybody in attendance here very well knows this data. Without such data, although it was very important in the previous period to support the liquidity of companies, retain jobs, and sustain the condition of our economy. Without them, probably the discussion today would have been completely different. But what I reckon should be understood by all of us is the fact that without structural systemic changes, there's no opening a road for a sustainable growth and development. Thank you, Minister Bidici, for your speech. Mr. Bidici mentioned many times systemic changes. For me, that's very positive, because the role of the government is not only to extinguish fires when a problem arises, but to build a system that will resolve problems itself, and the government should just sustain and maintain the system and support it in the course of time, which is very good. A lot is to be done though, but let us see how, since this is economy, investment and development in a crisis year, and how is this viewed by the other side, by the business sector. That is to say, we have a video addressed by Mr. Branko Azeski, who is Vice President here of the Assistance Fund. Virtually, he's not present, but nowadays it became quite normal. So if we could see this footage.
Почитувани дами и господа,
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to be here today at the one-year anniversary of the term of office of this government. The Chamber of Commerce of North Macedonia, as the most numerous business organization in the country, celebrated 100 years last year. I know that 1 year is the most difficult year. The first year is the most difficult one, and best experiences are acquired exactly at that period. Today I will speak about the cooperation we have between the public and private sector, because this is the key way of communication between the two communities that may bring progress for the country. That is why in the very beginning I will be very concise, and I will speak of both the positive and negative contexts in that regard. On 16th January this year, we said that we are satisfied with the formal cooperation, but we're not satisfied with the essential one. It should undergo transformations regarding the respect of our requests, because they arise from one of the most significant segments in the country. They come from the business sector, the real sector, and they truly present the situations and the developments, and I can confirm that they are in the interest of both the country and all of us. That is why I think that the government will accept this suggestion and will intensify the essential consultations with us in the forthcoming period. We've had good moments on several issues that are of crucial importance, such as the one that we are discussing today, and that is the issue of regional development. I personally believe, and my institution also believes, that it is of significant importance for the work and prosperity of the country. We've had situations with some stalls, but we're negotiating with the private sector to intensify the work and to be a significant segment in the policies. Especially regarding the competitiveness and the increase of the production with added value, because it is very important for the development of future perspectives. I can say that we are asking for better readiness of the government, especially regarding several issues. The rule of law as first one, and compliance with the market regulations, especially regarding the judiciary, because the business community suffers certain consequences. The second issue that is of importance is the issue raised in a debate among the public, that is the increase of the quotas for import of labor, and our view is identical with the government's one. We should increase the quotas, but we should take into account the national interests and the interests of the business and its development in the future period. Another important issue I would like to mention is that the fact that we adopted a very important document on the 100th anniversary, that is the Declaration for Social Consensus on Economic Policies and Measures, because it coincides with the national strategy for development adopted by the government. We will do anything in our power, together with the government, to harmonize these documents and to use them for our future operation and determination of the priorities. I would especially like to underline that it is high time, due to the current developments, to stop the adoption of certain laws and blocking of the adoptions, because it is difficult to adopt them. We should use this period to adopt laws that are stuck for several years, such as the law on holding, law amending the law 218, law on joint stock companies, and our initiative for amendments to the definition of the highest salaries, higher pension in times when we're paying the highest contributions for this purpose. These are very important laws and should be of greatest priority. We should use this period, we should use this year, so that the business can have certain benefits in future. This was an interesting view presented by Mr. Azaski. In the process of cooperation with the government, we are satisfied with the form, but not with the essence. Well, we at least have form, and I hope that the government will look into the essence in future. Although the business community always has its own requests and will continue to have them, at least from what we heard from Mr. Azaski. Now we come to the third part of our debate today. We have a representative from the academic community, Mr. Takifiti, my dear professor. So I should ask a professor to answer in only a few minutes, and I'm sorry for this, but it is what it is. My question is, since we're in a situation of a continuous crisis and we have certain measures in fiscal and monetary policy, what should both sides do so that they can be coordinated? What would be the role of the first one and what of the second one? And of course, what kind of coordination should they achieve? This is an important mechanism so that we can have some systemic solutions. Yes, thank you, Professor Uzunov. Dear guests, allow me to first conclude that in the last 10 years, the world and global economy are going through particularly difficult conditions because there are serious disruptions starting from 2007-2009 with the greatest recession, the deepest financial crisis following the one in the 30s after the Great Depression, and later we had the crisis of COVID-19, a short-term one, but it caused the strongest short-term decline. And now we have the current energy crisis with enormous increases in the prices of energy, the price of food. So the economies are facing serious challenges, and many world economies have stagflation tendencies. It is a modification of the economic cycle. Stagflation is a situation when we have three evils: reducing of the GDP, stagnant rates, even negative rates of growth, and on the other side we have relatively high rates of inflation and relatively high rates of unemployment. It is a very complicated situation. This is a disruption coming from shock on the side of the aggregate offer. In such situations, the IMF and the World Bank are decreasing the estimates for the dynamics of economic growth. Namely, the last report of the IMF, the world economic growth is planned to be 2.6% opposed to 3.2%. The experts of the IMF are right to say that almost 1/3 of the total economies in the world will have contractions and recessions. And it is very bad that China, the US, and the European Union are slowing down their growths. And the estimates of the IMF experts say that the growth can go below 2%. What is the worst for Macedonia? The worst is that the European Union, our relevant trade area, and especially Germany, in the role of our greatest trade partner, are facing serious problems. The growth in the Eurozone will be only 0.5% annually, and in Germany it is expected a negative growth rate of 0.3%. This has a great impact over the Macedonian economy due to the synchronizations of the businesses in the European Union compared to the economies in North Macedonia. That is why the estimates here are also decreasing. We are expected to have 2.6% of growth, and the more alternative one, 1.8%, whether the inflation rate will be between 8 and 9%. If we have the second alternative, we are not in stagflation, but we are very close to stagflation now. The question, how, in such situation, in such type of crisis, key macro policies are adopted, how the fiscal and monetary policy should coordinate. The crisis, mainly determined by the aggregate offer, is complicating the fiscal and monetary mix. They complicate the coordination of the two policies. We cannot fight against this crisis with the same measures as it was during the Great Recession in 2007-2009 and during the COVID crisis. Because in such situation, with classic recession, with reducing of the economic growth, decline in the rate of inflation and interest rates, now we find ourselves in different situation. The inflation is growing, so with great fiscal stimulus and loose monetary policy, we're adding fuel to the fire, and inflation will rise. So now we need to think about new coordination of the two policies. Here I would like to present what I think that the macroeconomic science top experts in this area and the creators of the policies are mentioning as the best policies for dealing with situations when the growth rates and the inflation rates are opposing. It is important to build fiscal space. Macedonia, as many countries in the world, since 2008 until today, has lost the fiscal space. The public debt is more than 60%. And this creates hazards. If we have new disruptions, the country will not be able to act through the fiscal policy. And it is necessary to have fiscal consolidation, graduate decrease of the budget deficits, typical for the country, not bigger than 2 to 3% of the GDP. The government plans budget deficit of 4.6%. The second thing, the point must be on public investments, increase in the public investments in the domain of energy, the overall energy transformation from fossil to renewable energy sources, increase in the energy intensity, green technologies in other domains, significant for the Macedonian economy. Beside energy, we have the sector of water management and waste management, but also public investments in human capital. This is very important. Education is also important, digitalization as well. The third measure, in my opinion, is not so much used with us. This is assisting our local companies to be better included in the regional value chains through the activities of the foreign companies in the zones. Very few companies are associating with the production of the foreign companies. Very often our entrepreneurs say that these companies do not want to cooperate with them, for companies to produce spare parts, components, etc. I don't think that this is true. If the companies secure good quality, the foreign companies will be interested because it decreases their costs of production. What can the government do? Several documents of the government foresee measures for support of those companies that will try to be part as subcontractors in the production of the foreign companies in the trade and industrial zones. In this way, we should increase our share in the global chains of value. Another thing that it is proposed by experts, the IMF and our experts, is the fact that in such situation, it will be difficult to remove from the budget the protection of the most vulnerable categories of citizens. But we should be very careful and very focused. The minister said increase of the salaries is defined systemically as well as with the pensions. However, we always must take into account the correlation between the growth of productiveness and growth of salaries. Each increase of salaries beyond the productivity will have an inflationary effect. The IMF experts also warn that this effect of inflation on short term is seen in the measure of freezing the prices of basic products. This had to be applied because at the moment when you will unfreeze the prices, if the inflation continues, it will be even strengthened. And on the monetary policy, the budget must be targeted. It should maximally support the companies that need support, especially the ones that deal with innovations. It should support only the vulnerable categories of the population, whereas the monetary policy in such situation, in order to eliminate the inflation, the monetary policy should be more strict. Interest rates should grow. Today, the reference interest rate is 4.75. Maybe in future, depending on the inflation, this rate should increase. But the National Bank is very cautious, and I think that we need the coordination with the budget so that they do not increase the interest rate too much, because it will have a counter effect of decreasing the investments and blocking off the growth. So the central bank must be very careful in such situation. Whether the central bank will be able to do this, it will depend on the budget. I think that these measures are part of the logic for the budget 2023, almost all of them, and that this is good. However, I'm quite concerned with the fact that the world economy is very bad, and with low growth rates, 1.8%, the influx in the budget can be reduced and will face certain issues with the budget. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor. I did not want to interrupt you because it was very interesting. I said that I will give part of my time to the professor. Yes, it was interesting, and the recommendations were very concise. Although it is obvious that the government will face certain problems, we cannot move the world economy, while at home we should adjust. And beside all problems, this is a pre-election year. We should be realistic. Let's continue. We'll return to the government again as one of the players in this constellation. However, now we'll speak of them as the implementers and not decision makers. Now I would ask Kira Naumov, the Director of the Development Bank, those who implement the decisions. Mr. Naumov, the Deputy Prime Minister said that financial support is of particular importance, and this is given by the Development Bank. Can you tell us what does the Development Bank has been doing since COVID-19 until today? Are there any novelties? Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Usually, my experience in such plenums at this time of the day, we are very happy with your attendance, bearing this fact in mind and the fact that one more panel is following. I'll be very brief, especially after the other co-speakers, and primarily I thank Mr. Bitici, who introduced you to the work of the bank. It's easier in front of this auditorium, and most of you know me, so I will give some of the numbers to be very precise and accurate without getting into the detail of it. You'll just give me one moment without complaining about what was happening when together with Mr. Farouk Ismaili we came to the management board and even supervisory board of the development bank. This was prior to the crisis. Something was happening in China far away from here. However, we almost had no time, 2 or 3 weeks, to get to know with what's happening with the bank. The crisis struck, and we were indeed disappointed because we thought that the employees there were actually beaten by the unfortunate circumstances we brought them in conditions of crisis. Somebody can use the crisis, and there were such bubbles even in the previous system. The crisis is our opportunity, fortunately, and we are saying a year of new opportunities. And for the development bank, that was the case on the outset. You all remember there was real panic created in such a small economy as ours, where across the world overnight we had a situation where repressively a number of industries were closed, we believe, due to the crisis. For example, the catering, tourism, transport, and so forth, where repressively those industries were closed. And this was the first click. Fortunately, we were very frightened about the whole situation. In collaboration with the Ministry of Finance and Mr. Bitici, we managed very quickly to develop two interest-free lines, credit lines of 5 million euro, and that was very quickly organized under the conditions where no contact was allowed. All the communication was supposed to go via electronic media, and very quickly we managed to apply those funds, and these funds helped a lot. And we are very proud of the fact that after 1 month, the delegation of the EU recognized what the Development Bank was doing, and very quickly, through the EU credit lines, 30 million euro was allocated to us. So at that panic period, we managed to place 45 million euro interest-free loans, and we reached 5 or 6 such credit lines. That was at the beginning, and now through some figures to corroborate what the Deputy Prime Minister has said, within these 3 years, I'm taking these 3 years as an average, we placed almost 300 million euro to support 7,500 projects. Only in 2022, we placed 107 million euro. What's important is that most of these funds, that is to say about 40%, were to support micro, small, and medium-sized companies in the production sector. And in spite of thinking that at the beginning we would just extinguish fires, what I will share with you next will speak in favor of something else. The bank managed to brag of its name, development, actually. That is we had a new credit line of 5.5 million euro, credit line for working capital, for increased prices of energies through the bank's participants in the amount of 10 million euro. Currently, we're working on the liquidity with this 10 million due to the increased energy prices, and new 10 million euros for energy efficiency and renewable energy sources, with an interest rate of 1.6%. Let us not forget the liquidity, the assistance to companies that have problem with energy supply, and photovoltaics were also accommodated with this to 10 million euro, and they will be extended in February based on the 10 million euro we had as completion of capitalization. I explained the conditions for extending loans for production, processing, and export of agricultural produce. That was a dormant credit line in the amount of 7 million euro at 1% interest rate, and the interest in this is indeed very high. And very briefly, and then after that, if the time allows for that, in this period crisis, we introduced a number of new products. The guarantee scheme was something new developed in the previous period. We thought it was difficult to implement in the conditions of crisis. We managed to do that. The goal was to increase, that is to say, the companies that have secured the lines through mortgages amounting to 15 million euro. We had 110 companies supported amounting to 9.8 million euro. Then customs guarantee, a new product, so not to commercial banks, but we cover the customs debt in imports and improvement of products. And we can say that the insurance for exports of domestic products and domestic liabilities. We have more than 500 purchases. In 2023, we secured 100 million euro of this type of receivables, and factoring is going up at 10% rate, and in the coming period we have almost completed agreement with APO 100 million euro, and with two other creditors, CEP and another agency, the AFD, France Development Agency, French, will have 50 million euro. We have new 200 million euro that will be at conducive conditions. Then the next time you can skip me, Professor Uzunov. I'll just say that the assets in the last 3 years marked 18.7% growth. So it amounted to 150 million euro, and now at the end of 2022, it amounted to 262 million euro. We have a share of 7% in gross loans extended to non-financial entities through the development bank. And finally, in addition to working with interest-free credits, we still manage to have profits at the end of our work, though that's not the goal. Net profit amounts 720,000 euro this year. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Naumov. It's very good. Yes, we are behind schedule, but if an institution has so many achievements, they should be shared. So as far as I understand here, there is money in place. So yes, there is money based on the fact that we repay, and we do have the understanding of the government. On 2 occasions, it provided capital with 3 million and 10 million euro to further capitalize the bank, and 200 million are also coming definitely. So there is money, everything else should follow. Then we go to the business sector. We had a representative, legendary Branko Ezaski. Now we have a younger representative, Mr. Ilya Gospodinov from the chambers. Mr. Gospodinov, a very nice surname. How do you assess the efforts of the government to improve the productivity of your workers? Very briefly in this segment. Yes, thank you. This is a very good question. Thank you for the kind invitation to be part of this panel today in front of this audience. On behalf of the ICT Chamber Masit, and on behalf of the broader private sector, as chairpersons of the Platform for Public-Private Dialogue, I deem that this is the true manner, one of the real methods and channels through which this type of strategic discussion should take place. in terms of how we would wish to move on current mode of operations as opposed to future mode of operations, what we wish to be in the future. So what's important is that I deem that these channels to express ourselves should be used. The conclusions from these channels should be used in a manner in which we will specify what we will not do in the future. I personally have the impression that we are still trying to sit on too many chairs. And this results in a dispersed efforts, that is to say, disintegrated efforts and approach to what should be our economic focus, according to me, and from the perspective of our sector. Why am I saying this? Because, first of all, the perspective of our sector is the sector with the most highly paid employees, and based on those most highly paid workers paying most contributions and taxes. If we go back in time, I follow up onto a public discussion in the government where a UNICEF report was presented about the situation in our education that was defeating per se. However, the conclusions of that report were that aside from the basics that should be food and energy, the focus to other sectors with the highest potential is missing out, which means that after the analysis of experts, and it is evident that we should give much more chance to skill-based industries as opposed to product-based industries. We are small and we lack big capacity in terms of production or human resources or even production facilities. But with the people we have available, well-educated, well-trained, we can accomplish a lot in the skill-based industry where they show excellent results. IT services are spontaneously growing in the last 10 years. And whenever we are talking about productivity and its increase, we have to understand that it should be twofolded viewed. The productivity on our side, on the side of the private sector, is shown by excellent working environment, benefits and privileges for employees, private healthcare to a great extent, and so forth. The productivity on the side of the state, I prefer to say state as opposed to government, the productivity on the side of the government has to be focused on the foundations for all of this to be growing even more. And the foundations are in infrastructure, education, and the greatest problems we've been facing in the last 10 years, which was the emigration of our young people, among whom the best paid young engineers, will be buffered by taking a strategic national approach to preserve them here, retain them here, and make them create value here. What must not happen is to stick plasters on huge wounds. And I am feeling that we are having a big wound that we will not try to resolve we as we are, but our children that are now going to primary school. Thank you. Thank you. You can see the business 4 minutes are 4 minutes and not 5. So yes, he's an information engineer. So we completed the first part, the first half of this panel. That was a bit retrospective of what has been happening, and now we'll have another round for questions and discussions relating to what we will do in the future, maybe this year or maybe in the mid-term or long term. From the time envisaged, we use 70%, more than 70%. So let us be very succinct, and we'll start with Mr. Gostodinov. Kira will also be asked very briefly. To what extent is the business prepared to join our country into the shared market of the EU? Very brief answer. The joining to the EU market will absolutely become a challenge and risk. But our private sector, our companies, and our employees have already been accustomed to working and being successful in situations where anything can be expected. So I deem that in a good number, the companies are already having contacts or are already part of larger international groups that are also operating on the EU market and global market in general. And especially for these companies, the challenge would be lower. But in general, I deem that the challenge will will be match the chance that is being offered to us. It's one thing to take the risk to adapt ourselves to the EU regulation, European market, quality, competition, and so forth. But on the other hand, it will bring about a better order of things, a very expected system of movement of the national economy. It is absolutely critical. Our integration into the EU is absolutely critical, and we will utilize this very well to become part of this larger market. And on the other hand, risks will be overcome by the resources provided right now for surprises, tax system shocks, international and global economy shocks, and so forth, will be dedicated to the adaptation of our business and performance even in that EU market. Thank you very much.
I'm very happy with this answer. I thought that the business sector will say we have no problem with that. On the contrary, we want it. Yes, it will be difficult, but we are very, very resilient. Yes, this is good. This is changing the mindset. So the country can be kept from the EU, but not the business sector. They will go deeper and deeper into the EU. One question for Mr. Kiranaumov. 1 minute. Each government, each state, and ours too, want righteous transition. What will our country do? What will the development bank do? Yes, I will use only 1 minute. Not only in future, but for this period as well. The credit market are directed at this energy transformation, green energy, and only in the past period, based on the things we mentioned, we have placed purpose 10 million and 5 million for this type of renewable energy resources and energy efficiency. But you should know that from the funds we have from the international creditors, about 30% upon request of the clients go into this part, in this type of, as you say, energy transformation. And I would only like to add the last credit line 7 that is in parliamentary discussion. The guarantee can be signed as soon as this ends. It says that out of these 100 million euros, at least in the final phase, should go into green economy, at least 30 million. The market asked for this, and we expect to be much more. Thank you. Thank you, Kira. quite concise and expressly. Professor Fiti, in this regard, what will we do in future? Your institution and you were part of the creation of the National Development Strategy. Now we have strategies on the compared to the past when we had plans. What do the citizens can expect to be foreseen in this strategy? Thank you. Thank you, Vancho. This is more informative answer. I will try to be brief. I don't know how much you know, but our country already works on national strategy for development of the Republic of North Macedonia for the next 20 years. The strategy is being prepared with the financial support of the British Embassy and the Good Management Fund, the Ministry of Finance of Slovakia, and with the great support and coordination of the UNDP and the program of the Agency for Development. In coordination and with the great support of the government of the Republic of North Macedonia, the government, in fact, assigned 2 coordinators, 2 economic ministers, Deputy President Pitiki and the Minister of Finance Fatmir Basimi. The work based on this program started in 2021, and in that period, the Macedonian Academy of Science and Arts was not involved. However, our experts and professionals, mostly university professors, researchers in institutes, prepared 8 so-called basic studies for certain areas. The first one is education, the second, economic development, the third, public finance and fiscal policy, the fourth, tourism, the fifth, regional development, equal regional development, labor market, social policy and pension system, as well as health and health infrastructure. These have already been prepared, these studies, and when the Academy was involved in the preparation for composing the strategy, October 2022, the first task we had was to revise the basic studies in this area. This audit was to look into the data and to make them more current. We used parts of the census, although they are not definite results. There are many significant indicators. We use the indicators from our own researches and calculations, as well as the database of Eurostat. We also used the data from the World Bank and the IMF. Furthermore, the organizers asked us to make 3 new basic studies, one for science and research for that sector, the second one for public institutions, and the third one for economic development and green economy, that is, creating conditions for green economy and creating conditions for new green jobs. We conducted these studies and we submitted them to the government. At our disposal, we had only 2 months, but I must say that with great engagement of the research team in the Academy, 15 people in this phase, and with the great support of the UNDP and in cooperation with them, we completed this on time. Analysis had to be conducted for the situations in 4 key areas that will be treated in the long-term strategy, that is human capital, growth, but it actually refers to economic development, and the strategy does not refer only to economic growth, but to development for all other segments in the society. environment and energy, and the fourth one is infrastructure and institutions. These are four complex topics. We were asked to present the situations, the state-of-the-art analysis, and the situation in these four segments, briefly on 20 to 30 pages with appropriate indicators. We also did this. And afterwards, we were asked to make one joint consolidated study out of the four ones, merging the four ones with a special emphasis on certain shared topics that are important features for each of these areas. This involves digitalization, social inclusion, resilience to crisis, something that is very important because each strategy faces this. It faces non-fulfillment and lack of realization due to some serious crises we've had in the past. It also includes the rule of law, something that is typical for all these areas, and so on and so forth. This was also completed, and let me tell you that we will continue with our job. We believe that in the second phase, the Academy will conduct the work. And let me tell you that this is a very important document. It is a visionary and strategic document for the basic directions, challenges, and visions of the Republic of North Macedonia in all areas of social life. The approach must be objective and scientifically founded. That is why the Academy was elected. Furthermore, we should have a wide consensus and cooperation in the preparation of the strategy of all relevant stakeholders in Macedonia. We've mentioned 60 such institutions that were consulted during the trainings and will continue to be consulted, starting from the president of the country, the government of the Republic of Macedonia, the assembly, agencies, and so on. Great number of institutions whose opinions will be taken into consideration, of course, and the basic precondition is to have wide consensus on this matter. Intergeneration one, interethnic one, intergender one, and interparty one for the basic objectives, challenges, and visions of the strategy, because it is the basic precondition to realize the strategy. If there is no consensus of all stakeholders, then we have not achieved anything. We're working intensively, and I believe that this task will be completed very successfully. Thank you, Professor. So we should expect it very soon? Yes, in a year, year and a half. Good. Year and a half is very soon for the academic community. Yes, now we'll return to the starting point for Mr. Bitiki to complete this panel and to say what in 2023 or in future maybe, what will the government do in this segment of development in crisis, systemically, of course. I will relate to what academician Fiti said, that is related to inclusiveness and why inclusion is in fact important. I remember that 23 years ago, when I started my career in the civil sector, we always spoke of how should we participate in the decision-making processes and policy-making processes, and it was imperative whether you will be invited at a meeting to be heard or whether one will be invited to be seen. And now, 24 years later, I can say that not only from this perspective, but also the fact that we are sitting here with various stakeholders and what we heard through video address, we're speaking, of course, we have the form, we have results, but the question is whether we can do something more about the essence. Yes, we can do a lot, because that is how we will restore the trust of all stakeholders to the country. But this is a very painstaking process. I started 24 years ago, and I'm here today, and I must confirm that, yes, we are very close to reaching overall inclusiveness in the policy-making processes, and I believe that the National Development Strategy is such product where all stakeholders will be included, and I can say that what we started is already yielding results, and that I'm very proud with this. All of us should be very proud with this. I would like to mention a few numbers because I believe that finally the country is where it should be, and that is to be partner for support of the development in those sectors that need it most. I see colleagues here who work in the segment of support and providing state aid. Last year, we had exponential growth of the number of supported companies compared to 2021 by 107% more. This equals 433 companies in the production. The overall support provided per various mechanisms is more than 45 million euros. We're not speaking of 1, 2, 3, or 5 companies supported by the government, but hundreds of companies that received support, and this is very important to be underlined. The second thing is whether and how we'll support the energy, green transition, the introduction to green economy. There is no green economy if there is no green transition. At this moment, through the initiative and the law on strategic investments, we have 10 active approved strategic projects in the area of energy. For the first time, I'm mentioning publicly 2.2 billion euros of 10 investments in green economy that will contribute to our transition, 100% private capital, and this should be in parliamentary procedure very soon. And of course, we should not forget to mention a great investment that is obvious it will happen after 18 years, and that is the energy capacity from hydro accumulations. This is Chebren. We have spoken a lot of it, but no one brought it so close to realization. And of course, the last segment that I believe that is very important, it is related to value issues, and that is fairness in the treatment of the companies in our country. That is the introduction and the fight against corruption and digitalization as tools so that our country can be better place. I remember in 2021, I started speaking with various donors and my colleagues about what we can do in order to improve the system and the mechanism for improvement of the efficiency of the state aid as a mechanism. And then we started talking about establishing management information system for state aid. And these days, this will start as an initiative together with the World Bank so that we can finally digitalize 11 processes, business processes in 11 public institutions that use the mechanism of state aid and providing public money to various stakeholders in our society. This will help to increase the efficiency and effectiveness. And what was striking for me was the State Department report in 2021 directed at the fact how companies are supported in our country, how investments are supported in our country, how state aid is provided. Although it was said that the government is investing efforts to create one-stop shops in the cabinet of the deputy president of the government in charge of economic affairs, the report also stated that on various levels, we can still feel the opportunities for corruption. And then I said that the only way to do this And to tackle this is to start the digitalization process, and that is why then, together with the Fund for Innovations and Technological Development, we made a challenge where we invited our good startups supported by the fund to create a digital assistant. At that time, no one believed in this digital assistant, but we thought that digitalization is the response to all disadvantages appearing in various reports, such as the one from the State Department regarding the fight against corruption and organized crime. Because the only way to address this is through complete removal of the human factor and to make the process transparent. And then we decided that we will make Ada the first digital assistant who was ever part of the public sector. Ada is this change that we should do in the next year and the years to come if we want to reach the growth and development we are striving for. Our Ada is our response and our chat GTP. 2 years ago, we started with the people from the fund and all the others who are here in this room. We started creating the digital assistant, and Ada is a digital assistant based on artificial intelligence that will provide information about investments. And in the next month, it will be promoted. Ada speaks 3 languages, Macedonian, Albanian, and English. And it got its name by Ada Lovelace. It is believed that she was the first female informatician from the 19th century. And those who are in the IT industry know that she concluded that the machines have greater use, not only simple calculation, and she created the first algorithm. And that is why we believe that Ada should be the pioneer in the establishment of digital assistant in the public sector that will bring greater transparency in all processes. And of course, it will eliminate the human factor where it should be eliminated. Thank you. Thank you. If Ada was here, whether she would have been mad or not due to the time, we were only 10 minutes plus from the allotted time. This is quite acceptable for Macedonia. 15 academic minutes. I would like to thank all the participants at this panel and to all you who gave us your attention. See you on another occasion.
Почитувани гости, следува четвртиот панел Социјални и здравствени политики во време на криза, на кој ќе продискутираме за ефектите од антикризните мерки, воведувањето